All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive, honestly kind of intimidating transition in the world of advanced therapies. We are moving from the controlled, small-scale successes of the research lab straight into the highly complex reality of commercial manufacturing. Module 8 is all about scale-up, validation, stability, and putting all of that technical data together into the CMC dossier.
Think about this for just a second. How exactly do you mass-produce a fragile viral vector or a super delicate lipid nanoparticle without completely breaking it? It is a monumental challenge. A brilliant, life-saving therapy engineered in a petri dish is essentially useless to the wider world if it can't be reliably scaled up, manufactured consistently, and definitively proven safe to the regulators. The stakes in this phase of development literally couldn't be higher.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We've got 5 main stops. First, scale up and tech transfer. 2, the comparability challenge. 3rd is the validation lifecycle. 4, ensuring platform stability. And finally, assembling the CMC dossier.
Kicking things off with Part 1, Scale Up and Tech Transfer.
Leaving the lab bench behind means stepping into a world where everything just gets bigger, faster, and way more complicated. You know, it's really tempting to think scaling up a drug process is just doing the math and multiplying your recipe, but it is definitely not simple math. It's kind of like taking a delicate souffle recipe from your home kitchen to a massive industrial factory. Mixing and mass transfer effects are highly scale dependent. As your equipment gets bigger, the fundamental physics literally change. LNP formation, for example, is incredibly sensitive to scale. And when you're looking at viral vector culture or mRNA synthesis, things like mixing uniformity and oxygen transfer, they behave completely differently in a 2,000-liter bioreactor compared to a tiny little lab flask. You really have to rely on targeted engineering studies and scaled-down models, not just linear assumptions.
So how do we actually test these giant new processes safely, or transfer a method to a totally new facility without risking everything? Well, we use what are called engineering batches. Basically, these are runs that let you test a process, or maybe a new piece of equipment, without the intense pressure of having to meet full commercial release criteria. You're generating crucial, practical learnings, but at a much lower risk. Alongside demonstration batches, these engineering runs give you the vital data you need to tweak your process and really nail down your acceptance criteria before you go ahead and commit the massive time and money required for fully validated commercial batches. Moving right along to Part 2, the comparability challenge.
Whenever you make a change, whether you're moving to a new manufacturing site, scaling up equipment, or even just switching your lipid supplier, you absolutely have to prove that this change doesn't alter the final product. And you can't just look at the final product, run a casual test, and confidently declare it's the same. No way. You need a predefined analytical plan. The absolute key here is that your acceptance criteria must be established before any data is generated. It's a very strict exercise. You've got to evaluate process performance evidence, things like yield and in-process control trends, right alongside rigorous analytical testing. Any decision that the product is comparable has to be exhaustively documented and heavily justified by science.
Now, what's really interesting here is the delicate balance between what we already know and what we actually have to prove. We often lean on platform prior knowledge, our past experience with similar mRNA or viral vectors. And this knowledge is pure gold because it can really inform and shrink the scope of your comparability work. But, and it's a big but, it cannot completely eliminate the need for product-specific bridging data. Depending on how big the manufacturing change is, regulators might still demand new non-clinical or even clinical data to bridge the gap. Understanding the absolute limits of your platform knowledge is just as critical as knowing its power.
Okay, Part 3. The validation lifecycle.
Here we step into the highly rigorous, highly structured regulatory frameworks required to prove that a process works consistently every single time you run it. Because validation is not just a one-and-done event, it's a continuous lifecycle built on 3 main pillars. Step 1 is process characterization, where you run studies to figure out exactly how your process parameters impact your final product quality attributes. Then, Step 2 is the big one, process performance qualification, or PPQ. This is that critical demonstration showing your commercial scale process performs consistently across a set number of batches. Finally, Step 3 is continued process verification, which provides ongoing everyday assurance that the process stays perfectly in control during routine production.
But hold on, PPQ isn't the whole story. We've also got these absolutely critical secondary validations. You need aseptic process validation to guarantee sterility. You need shipping and hold time studies, cleaning validations, and this is a big one for modern facilities, single-use system validation. Because think about it. A beautifully synthesized mRNA sequence means absolutely nothing if a single-use plastic bag leaches contaminants into the batch, or if the product just degrades the second it gets loaded onto a delivery truck. Every single step has to be validated, no exceptions.
Let's pivot to part 4, ensuring platform stability. I mean, really ask yourself, what good is a literal miracle therapy if it expires on the shelf or the molecule just falls apart before it ever reaches a patient in a clinic? Each platform has its own distinct vulnerabilities that we really need to understand. For viral vectors, the major stability concerns are infectivity loss and aggregation over time. With bare mRNA, you're constantly battling integrity loss and reduced potency. And when you package that mRNA into a lipid nanoparticle, an LNP, things get even more complex. You have to watch out for particle attribute drift and the formation of RNA lipid adducts. Basically, those are unwanted chemical reactions between the RNA and the lipid shell that create harmful degradation products.
And we're not just worrying about the drug itself here. We have to obsess over its packaging too. Container closure integrity has to be assessed across the entire stability program, not just at the initial release. Why does this matter? Well, imagine a vial going through multiple intense freeze-thaw cycles just to see what it can handle, or enduring the crazy vibrations of global shipping. Those physical stresses can easily compromise a vial seal over time. So, checking the seal once at the factory just doesn't cut it if you want to guarantee the product is still sterile 6 months down the line. You also need in-use stability studies to figure out the exact practical window a healthcare provider has after they first open that container.
Which brings us to our final stop, Part 5, Assembling the CMC Dossier.
This is where all of our hard work finally culminates. It's time to take every single piece of data from scale-up comparability, validation, and stability, and organize it perfectly to satisfy the regulators. All of this information gets packaged into what's known as CTD Module 3. Now, early on in development, during those investigational IND or IMPD stages, you submit chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, or CMC information that's appropriate for early clinical trials. But as your program pushes toward late-stage development and final approval, the expectations for depth and absolute rigor escalate massively. CTD Module 3 is the internationally recognized structure for organizing this massive mountain of quality information into a final marketing application.
Now here is one crucial detail to note specifically for RNA platforms. mRNA vaccine guidance and the broader mRNA or RNA medicine guidance are definitely related, but they are distinct regulatory pathways. An mRNA vaccine and an mRNA therapeutic might use the exact same manufacturing platform, but they can face very different regulatory expectations. It's also super important to remember that some current FDA and EMA guidance for these cutting-edge therapies is actually still in draft form. We are literally navigating developing regulatory thinking as the science itself evolves, so you have to treat it as a bit of a moving target until it's officially finalized.
Let's ground this and see how it plays out tangibly with a fictional case study from our sources, Vectra Biomanufacturing Ltd. Let's say Vectra is transferring its lentiviral culture to a new format and adding a second fill-finish site. They can't just make the change, run a few quick tests, and hope for the best. Nope. They have to map out a highly structured technology transfer plan, generate those engineering batches we talked about, and then map all that predefined comparability data directly into the relevant sections of CTD Module 3. Regulatory questions about potency, impurities, and comparability, those have to be anticipated and addressed proactively right there in the submission.
And hey, the journey doesn't stop just because the drug gets approved. The commercial life cycle is absolutely full of post-approval changes. Whether that's a site change, bringing on a new raw material supplier, or just a minor process tweak, every single change requires strict categorization. You have to figure out if it needs prior approval, a simple notification, or just internal documentation. And what's the technical backbone of almost all these post-approval change packages? You guessed it, it's that comparability strategy we discussed earlier. Robust change management is really how you sustain product quality and ensure a steady supply for the entire life of the therapy on the market.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a rather provocative question to chew on. As our platform knowledge for things like mRNA and viral vectors continues to expand at lightning speed, how will we balance that incredibly valuable prior experience with the regulator's ongoing, relentless need for product-specific evidence in the future? It is a fascinating, complex challenge, and finding that perfect balance is going to define the next decade of biomanufacturing. Thanks for diving into Module 8 with me today.